Revolution. The word itself usually rings with the promise of justice, a cleansing fire against tyranny. But sometimes, that fire turns into something far more vile, a darkness that doesn't just burn down regimes, but reaches in and devours the human soul itself. In October of 1793, while Paris still reeked of blood and smoke from the slaughter of the aristocracy, a woman sat alone in a damp stone cell inside the Conciergerie, a place already infamous as the waiting room of death. Her name was Marie Antoinette, once Queen of France, now reduced to a number. Prisoner 280. Every title, every shred of dignity, every layer of protection her crown had once given her had been ripped away. History remembers her execution, the guillotine that severed her head on October 16th. But the chilling truth is this: Marie Antoinette died long before that blade ever fell. She died slowly, agonizingly, piece by piece, inside a cell that became the stage for her methodical destruction. So what really happened in those 76 days between her arrival at the Conciergerie on August 2nd and her final walk to the scaffold? The answer isn't found in noble speeches or revolutionary manifestos. It hides instead in fragile letters from guards, in secret diaries of witnesses, and in official records that France kept sealed for more than 2 centuries. This is not the story of a queen calmly accepting her fate. This is the documented chronicle of systematic humiliation, psychological torture, and a pervasive degradation dressed up as revolutionary justice. Marie Antoinette was not simply executed. She was erased. Her humanity was deliberately dismantled before her body ever reached the guillotine. Imagine being, for a time, the most powerful woman in Europe. Palaces spreading out beneath your feet, kings and ambassadors bowing in your presence, entire nations shifting because of your marriage, your alliances, your whims. And then, in one violent historical heartbeat, everything is torn away. Not just your crown and your wealth, but your children, your freedom, your very name. And finally, the most basic dignity of simply being treated like a human being. That was the fate of Marie Antoinette. And the revolutionaries of Paris knew exactly how to choreograph each step of her descent, ensuring maximum suffering. On August 2nd, 1793, she was taken from her relatively bearable confinement in the Temple Tower and transferred to the notorious Conciergerie. Officially, this move was for security reasons, after the discovery of a failed royalist escape attempt. But the truth was far more political and far more cruel. The revolution needed a spectacle. To give the people that spectacle, they first had to transform Marie Antoinette into something they could hate, not pity. The temple, with its relative privacy, still allowed her too much dignity, too much humanity. The Conciergerie would correct that mistake. This was not just any prison. This medieval fortress on the banks of the Seine was dark, wet, and crawling with rats. It was infamous as the last stop before the guillotine. Hundreds had gone in and never come out alive. The cell prepared for Marie Antoinette was number 12. It measured barely 3 square meters. The walls were blackened with mold. The stone floor was permanently cold, forever damp from the moisture that seeped up from the Seine flowing beneath the building. Her entire world was reduced to a narrow iron bed, a fragile wooden chair, a chamber pot, and a single flickering candle. The window was barred and set so high in the wall that she couldn't see outside. It allowed only the faintest, sickly shaft of light, just enough to hint whether it was day or night. But the physical misery was only the beginning. The revolutionaries understood something very clearly. True degradation doesn't come just from discomfort. It comes from stripping a person of privacy, of dignity, and of control over their own body. So Marie Antoinette was placed under constant surveillance, 24 hours a day. And this was not discreet observation from outside the cell. 2 armed revolutionary guards were ordered to live and sleep inside that tiny space with her. According to the records of the prison's director, François Bolt, these guards were instructed to document everything she did, every movement, every breath, every gesture, every moment, day and night, was to be observed and reported. She could not wash herself, could not change her clothes, could not relieve herself without their eyes on her. Contemporary accounts speak of her desperate pleas for a curtain, a screen, anything that might give her a sliver of privacy. Every request was coldly denied. The official excuse was security. The real reason, of course, was deliberate humiliation. Imagine the psychological torment of never being alone, not for a second, of knowing that whatever you do, however intimate, however degrading, is being watched, judged, and silently recorded. Marie Antoinette, who had once moved freely through vast palaces with hundreds of servants at her command, could no longer perform the most basic human functions without an audience. This was not a simple security measure. It was a calculated strategy to break her mind before her trial even began. The revolutionaries knew that a broken woman at the scaffold was far more useful than a dignified queen. The people had to see her crushed, humiliated, defeated, pitiful. The indignities did not end with constant surveillance. Inside that damp, moldy cell, her health deteriorated rapidly. She suffered from chronic bleeding, worsened by immense stress and the appalling conditions. Most likely, she was in the advanced stages of uterine cancer. She received virtually no proper medical care. Her white undergarments had to be changed frequently because of the bleeding. Even this necessity became a tool of systematic degradation. According to the memoirs of Rosalie Morlier, one of the few female attendants allowed to care for her, every change of clothing had to be carried out in front of the male guards. The former Queen of France was forced to remove, wash, and change her blood-stained underclothes under the eyes of strangers. Rosalie describes how Marie Antoinette tried, again and again, to preserve what little modesty she could. She would turn her back to the guards, retreat to a corner, and attempt to shield herself from their gaze. But even that small act of self-protection was sometimes denied. On several occasions, the guards demanded that she strip completely naked in front of them, under the flimsy pretext of checking whether she carried hidden weapons or escape plans. This was not security. This was sexualized violence, barely disguised as revolutionary duty. The guards commented on her body. They laughed at her condition. They treated the former Queen of France with the same contempt they reserved for a common criminal, perhaps worse. Each humiliation, each forced exposure was recorded not as a scandal, but as proof of the revolution's absolute control over her. The dehumanization continued relentlessly. Her hair, once her pride, meticulously styled and powdered according to the fashion of Versailles, was now neglected, streaked with gray, and falling out in clumps under the combined assault of stress, malnutrition, and disease. She lost weight rapidly. Her face grew hollow, her skin so pale it seemed almost translucent. Meanwhile, revolutionary newspapers printed cruel caricatures portraying her as an ugly, depraved witch, a grotesque monster that bore little resemblance to the dying woman in cell 12. The goal was clear. The French public must not see Marie Antoinette as a suffering human being. They had to see her as the living embodiment of evil, someone who deserved every ounce of torment she received. The most atrocious degradation arrived with her trial, which began on October 14, 1793. This was never a genuine legal proceeding. It was theater, carefully staged, tightly controlled, and utterly predetermined. The verdict had been decided long before Marie Antoinette ever entered the courtroom. She was charged not only with conspiring against the revolution, but with something far more shocking, far more grotesque: the accusation that she had sexually abused her own son, 8-year-old Louis Charles. The charge was entirely fabricated. It was based solely on a confession extracted from the terrified child after months of isolation, manipulation, and brutality at the hands of his captors. Even within the revolutionary tribunal, some members reportedly recoiled. The accusation was so vile, so openly inhuman, that it caused visible discomfort in the room. But discomfort did not stop it. The charge was read aloud, publicly, before a jeering, bloodthirsty crowd. People who had been carefully conditioned to see Marie Antoinette not as a mother, not as a woman, but as a monster. The intention was absolute annihilation of her moral standing. There would be no sympathy left to cling to. Imagine the situation: a mother forcibly separated from her children, imprisoned for months in a damp cell, dying slowly from a disease eating her from the inside. And now she stands before a packed courtroom, accused of committing the most unthinkable crime a mother could ever commit. For a moment, just one moment, something remarkable happened. Marie Antoinette turned away from her accusers and faced the women in the audience. Her voice, weak but steady, cut through the noise, and she spoke words that history would remember. "I appeal to all mothers present. Is such an accusation even possible?" For an instant, the courtroom fell silent. It was a fragile, fleeting silence, but it was real. In that moment, stripped of her crown, her titles, and nearly her life, she reclaimed a sliver of her humanity. Not as a queen, but as a mother. The machinery of the revolution could not allow that. The silence shattered. The trial pressed on with renewed cruelty. Over the course of 2 days, Marie Antoinette was interrogated for more than 16 exhausting hours. She was given no real rest. She was weak from hunger, dizzy from blood loss, barely able to stand. None of it mattered. On October 15th, after this grotesque parody of justice, she was sentenced to death by guillotine. The verdict shocked no one, but the manner in which it would be carried out contained one final, calculated humiliation. Unlike her husband, Louis XVI, who had been transported to his execution in a closed carriage, Marie Antoinette was denied even that small mercy. She was ordered to be taken through Paris in an open cart. This was deliberate. The people needed to see her, to mock her, to spit at her, to reassure themselves that the once powerful queen was now nothing more than a broken criminal. Her hands were tied tightly behind her back, like a common offender. Her hair, once legendary throughout Europe, was roughly cut off. What remained was uneven, crude, and gray. She was dressed in a plain white shift, already stained with sweat and blood. On the morning of October 16th, 1793, Marie Antoinette began her final journey. Witnesses described a woman barely recognizable as the radiant queen who had once dazzled courts across the continent. Her face was sunken. Her eyes appeared hollow, distant. Her body was bent with pain and exhaustion, and yet, even now, she tried to hold on to the last fragments of dignity left to her. She sat upright in the cart. She kept her head raised. She refused to meet the eyes of the screaming crowd that lined the streets. Some hurled insults. Others laughed. Some followed the cart for blocks, eager to savor every second of her humiliation.